для забезпечення
to ensure 100% security and liberty of vessel navigation through the Black Sea basin, Crimea should return to Ukrainian family just as it happened in 1999. Crimea is Ukraine.
Are demonstrating our unity, our solidarity, and we need to seek common opportunities because we have common interests and common concerns. So this day, all the speakers, and participants discussed about how can we find solutions to the risk, threats, and challenges in the region.
Добрий день, я вітаю.
Good afternoon. I want to thank everybody who joins us. My name is Olga Skrypnyk and Ukraine Media Center Ukrinform is happy to see all of you here today. We started this conversation today with a short video about how the first security Black Sea conference was taking place within the framework of Crimea platform. I'm reminding you it was taking place on 12th and 13th of April in Romania, and we invited all of you to talk about the results of this conference, what resolutions were taken and what was going on. I want to introduce our speakers today. It's Emine Japarova, First Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, Alina Frolova, Deputy Chair of the Board of the Center for Defense Strategies and Deputy Minister of Defense of Ukraine in 2019-20, Olga Skrypnyk, a board chairperson at the Crimean Human Rights Group, and Oleksandr Khara, diplomat, foreign and security policy expert at the Center for Defense Strategies. Good afternoon, dear friends. Let's start this conversation with why is it so important to bring up this topic? To what extent did you feel that our partners are ready to talk about that, to discuss the security situation that should be established in the Black Sea region? Please, Ms. Emine. Thank you, Olga. Dear colleagues, dear journalists, dear friends and partners, really, I'm very happy to state that for the time being, the architecture of the Crimean platform that we were planning several years ago, it's perfect. It's accomplished. We are preparing the next summit upon the order of the president. There was a parliamentary summit in Croatia, and the Black Sea Conference is the final component of this architecture, the one that took place in Romania. Unfortunately, we were not able to have it when we planned it, and we had to postpone it until this moment. Why is it important? We understand that today the equator of the Black Sea is a source of threat and insecurity, not only for Ukraine, not only for the countries of the Black Sea bases, but for the eastern flank of NATO, for the European Union, and for the security system installed in the world. Russian Federation, by its aggression, which started in 2014, it destroyed the existing architecture of security, and for the 6 countries of the Black Sea basin, they are the source of the constant insecurity. The Sea of Azov was turned into an internal lake, and we have to communicate that we have to have clear vision and strategy. How should we act? We have to identify the threat and to work out the ways to cope with those threats. The dynamics of the war influences this, but this full-scale invasion are the additional lever, additional component for our agreement to get united around the Black Sea. It's a good example of the synergy of our efforts. The first day there was an expert discussion, my colleagues will tell you about that. There was a document worked out that we start processing. I mean the government, we will start discussing it with our partners. Another day was formal. It was organized on the level of the Ministries of Foreign Affairs and Ministry of Defense, and the task was to initiate a discussion. So who attended the conference? More than 200 participants, maybe 250 participants from 50 different countries, not only transatlantic, not only European countries, but also from countries from South America. Some experts were joining us online from all the regions of the world, and for us it's important to have the broad geography of the Crimea platform. And it was the first time when the representatives of the new platform joined us. You know that Ukraine was a head of the committee of the Danube navigation, and we continue expanding our geography of the Crimean platform, and we hope that there will be another summit on 23rd of August in a hybrid format, just like the previous one, and it will demonstrate the necessary results. What were the tasks that we set for ourselves? To identify the clear threats, to find the algorithm for solution of the threats, and as the practical steps of all of our actions, we were talking about the demining. Unfortunately, for the time being, Ukraine is most densely contaminated with mines. 175,000 square kilometers are densely contaminated with mines, and the matter of demining is a long-term issue. Recently, we had the Minister of Culture of Croatia visiting us, and her father was the mayor of Dubrovnik. And after 10 years after the end of the war in Croatia, 2 people died as a result of explosion of unexploded explosive devices. And we engage all the countries to start demining projects in the Black Sea, the project of joint petrol. And it's sensitive. We understand some countries may have their interests, some things are quite difficult to push, but we think that we need to have a joint petrol, we need to have NATO presence that existed some time ago, but we think that the balance of forces which would be demonstrated by the NATO allies would be an important component, important element of security. Russia suspends the navigation of the trade vessels and suspended them for sometimes hours, sometimes for days. They were withholding our vessels in the Black Sea, and the Black Sea, due to the absence of the necessary route, became a threat in terms of export of grains. We appreciate the input of the Secretary General of United Nations and the government of Turkey for assisting us in extension of the grain deal, and such project as grain from Ukraine is an important project, because while Ukraine suffers from those threats imposed by Russia in terms of food security, when we export 100,000 tons of grain to some countries of Africa who suffer from famine, it's important to explain that another country which suffers from war wants to logically help other countries which suffer too. So in summary, we want this Black Sea Security Conference to be the annual platform, just like other dimensions of Crimean platform, and I think that there is a vast field to join efforts between experts and the government representatives. We take pride in the broad network that was built around the Crimean platform, but sometimes what the governments can do, the experts can do that, and we see that networking works too, and our task is to let the experts work under the broad geography of the Crimean platforms along their horizontal ties. And we think that strategically Ukraine has to have a maritime state. We have to have big fleet, we have aspiration to this. I hope we will have subjectivity and necessary resources. Thank you. Before we proceed to the expert component and expert work, I would like to ask you, Ms. Emine, what have you heard from our partners, government officials who were represented during that conference? What was the perception of our plan, the plan proposed by Ukraine? Have we heard any interest in proposals in this regard. Yes, there is obviously interest. What was the summary of the platform is that we created the narrative that Crimea is Ukraine, and without Crimea then there can be no victory. And it got the same nature inside of our society. We created this point of no return that when we explained that we are ready. I'm working on professionally on the topic of Crimea within the last years, and I can say that this opinion did not exist in our society before. All the partners are different, all of them have their interests, but this is what subjectivity of the country is about, to promote our vision and to unite other countries around our vision. No one believed in Crimea platform way before, but it started working, and we have to continue working in this area. The partners have interest, especially the countries of the Black Sea basis. We want Georgia, Bulgaria, and Romania to be more active, not only Turkey, who is the most active in the Black Sea. We think it's a joint interest of the Black Sea countries, and we should have the joint strategy, and this is what we're pushing them to. In cooperation with our colleagues, the experts, we will make a voyage around those Black Sea Basin countries to promote our vision. And in the fields of the Black Sea Conference, we had another meeting in the triangle Romania, Moldova and Ukraine, where we were talking about the security issues. We adopted the joint declaration on the level of the ministers of foreign affairs and ministers of defense, and in fact the key sentence what we push the countries to is that the Black Sea is the source of threat, and we have to join our efforts. Alina, the security conference joined many experts from different countries of the world. All of them took part in this conference. There was a document prepared, a document that we introduced for further negotiations by our partners, by the experts. What is that document? Can you give us a little bit more detail about that, and what was the perception in the expert crowds of that document? Yes, really, we had more than 60 experts from 15 different countries. As Emine mentioned, we had 2 days. First day was the day of expert discussions, and we were discussing this document that we will tell you about. And another day was when the experts had an opportunity to talk in the lobbies with the government officials to exchange thoughts. And the first day was dedicated to the discussion of the expert document that Mr. Oleksandr will tell in more detail about. So it's dedicated to how us, the experts of the Crimean platform, how we see the configuration of security in the Black Sea. What is the security, what are its components, what is this configuration, and how can we achieve it, with the specific examples of what can be done right now. And during that conference, when we were preparing the political day, we took that approach. During the first panel, we were discussing the lessons learned from how the Crimean Peninsula was occupied along with the Black Sea, and another panel was dedicated to the solutions, what we can do right now. And the third panel was dedicated to the statements of how the key players see the configuration security in future in the Black Sea and Sea of Azov. And it's important because I support Emine that if a couple of years ago everybody was putting Crimea beyond the brackets, no one was talking about the Black Sea, it was beyond discussions. So now we continue to, now we start talking about Crimea, about the Black Sea, we start talking about it cautiously, but the majority of our partners, they keep silence about the Black Sea. There is the configuration where it's only Russia and Ukraine who are united around the Sea of Azov, who border on the Sea of Azov. And talking about the document, I mentioned that there were some mistakes, and the key mistakes were the absence of the key security players in the Black Sea. global players in the beginning of 2014, before the full-scale invasion that was initiated by Russia in February last year. So for the moment of the beginning of aggression, there was no single NATO vessel in the Black Sea. The last one was French, and it left in January. Non-Black Sea Basin NATO members. So if we see the strategies of NATO in European Union, Great Britain, United States, as to the presence, as their policies as to the presence in the basins of the seas, there is no Black Sea in that strategy, and it is only mentioned in Great Britain's strategy. Their strategy says they have interest in to have presence in the Black Sea basin, and when the full-scale aggression has begun, when everybody had seen how the sea is being used, European strategy started saying that there is a conflict in the Black Sea, and that was it. The majority of the strategy was dedicated to the eastern region. Is the document of the European Union, and there is a war going on right by their border, and it's right by the borders of the Black Sea Basin countries who are members of the European Union. And in the United States there is a draft law in the Congress as to the necessity to create the strategy for the Black Sea. It's the fourth document of that kind, and all the previous ones were not formulated properly. So the key players did not formulate their interests, their intentions as to that region. Again, in that region there are European Union and NATO countries there, and Black Sea and Crimea are the source of threat for all the European continent. And third is the influence on the Baltic Sea, in the Mediterranean Sea, and other regions where Russia can reach thanks to projecting their force, including their military force, from the Black Sea region. And that was the purpose of the conference, to propel those strategies, formulating those strategies. Ukraine, on our part, we formulate our key position, but at the same time we have to stimulate, so to say, our partners, so they formulate their stance, and based on that stance we may create security strategies, defense strategies, and strategies for development. Because we have to understand, as we physically liberate Crimea, Ukraine will not be able to physically defend our territories. Our navy is etiolated, and it's not something that we may renew within half a year. And by the moment of liberation of Crimea, which we hope will not take long, but we should have very clearly formulated strategy about how we would maintain security and safety in the Black Sea region. It should be a coalition effort. They should be the freighted, the already pre-ordered, so to say, coalition efforts. So we have to stimulate our partners, we have to prepare all the necessary actions on our part to start to initiate creation of such coalitions, and we have to achieve certain result that we would be able to implement as Crimea would be liberated. Mr. Oleksandr, let's stop a little bit in more detail on that document. What is the future vision of the security configuration in the Black Sea? I want to add just one thing about the urgency of that conference and Crimean topic. When Ukrainian armed forces are preparing to, I hope, quick movement to liberate our territories from northern barbarians, we are hearing something from our partners that those are the red lines. Let's keep the Crimean Peninsula beyond the bracket. You get victory on the battlefield, and then diplomacy comes. regardless me being a former diplomat, I don't believe in this Crimean strategy. The best diplomat is our armed forces, and it was important to demonstrate that it's not the 10 friends of Putin, such democratic countries as Sudan, Venezuela, North Korea. They were voting against our territorial integrity, and it was important to bring up that issue before something that we expect to become a great history of Ukraine. Regarding the document, unlike the Mediterranean Sea, which was a united sea since ancient times, the Black Sea is unfortunately something that every country sees as its own, or in their area. For example, there is Turkey, who balances, they have their interest with Russian Federation and with us. They support us on one hand, and on the other hand, those threats that are initiated by Russia, they try to balance there. And we understand that with all those regional countries in the Black Sea, we cannot have them engaged in installation of permanent peace and coping with Russian threats. So this is why we want Great Britain and other countries to join us in that region. It's good that Great Britain, back in 2014, they initiated this strategy to chase their interests in the Black Sea. Well, because what, for example, Russia does in the Mediterranean Sea or Baltic Sea, they are the patterns of aggressive behavior, and we cannot counter Russia only in one small segment of the map. We have to build this strategy all along the front lines. We don't have a new vision of Europe in the world. Just like George Bush put it, Europe is integral in peace and peaceful. This formula is only working when all the territories will be liberated, including Moldova and Georgia, those occupied by Russia. And when Moldova and Georgia become the members of NATO, this is when Russian project cannot advance more. And all those items that we formulated in the document is to reinforce the regional countries and to counter the criminal activities of Russian Federation, and also to engage the external players to jointly counter those threats. Absolutely urgent thing is the protection of sea communications. Since 2018, Russia started the blockade of Sea of Azov. They worked out certain strategy, and in 2022 they in fact blocked the Black Sea for us, but they also threat other countries in that basin. The mine security is something that was discussed too, and it's important to have the common vision of all the threats and challenges. So when we are not a member of NATO, it's important to create an integral system of the institutional unity, so we know everything that criminal Russia does in this region or in the region of the Black Sea, so we could exchange this information. It's clear that it is necessary to reinforce the defense potential. Why should we do it in the Black Sea? Because there is Montreux Convention, and unfortunately it limits the presence by the types of the military vessels in the Black Sea. So not to violate that convention, which is, I could say, sacral for the Turkish, we understand that for Ukraine and Romania we need to reinforce our defense capabilities, we need investments, we need technologies to rebuild our navies. It's clear that there is also an economic aspect. We paid less attention to it because it's clear that the majority of countries are oriented to European continent, European integration, European markets is the solution. But again, raising investments to the countries of region is important too. Another important aspect is, before the matter of human rights, it's important we see how the human rights were violated in Crimea, and how this information of this technology of information aquarium was installed there. It spread it over Russia first, the process of Nazification, and then in occupied territories as well after the 24th of February 2022. So it's an important issue too, to have all those principles. Our worldview is being built on the Charter of the United Nations, and where there is an important package on the human rights. So we resume its operation on all over the territory of Ukraine. So the conference was very interesting. We've seen some nervous reaction from Moscow. We understand that they are being irritated at mentioning of Ukrainian Crimea. They are irritated by the idea of existence of some plans in this regard. They understand that we are about to take arms to return our land. There would be no compromise about that, and one of the moments why this compromise cannot exist is because there is existential threat to Ukraine as long as Crimea is occupied. I'm not even mentioning humanitarian aspect. Everybody knows about the violation of human rights, Ukrainians, Crimean Tatars, that's all clear. But without Ukrainian Crimea, there would be no opportunity to develop our economy and to feel secure. Another moment is that Crimea is the threat to all the region of the Black Sea, because unfortunately Russia keeps dominating there. And the third thing, what Alina mentioned, if there would be no annexation of Crimea, Russia would not have committed all those crimes in Libya, Northern Africa and Syria, where they reinforced their presence thanks to, in particular, Wagner Group. And what we also wanted to do to communicate to Europeans, that those platforms that exist in Russia, they don't only threat us. Those calibers that fall on our heads, they were not designed to blackmail us. They were designed to blackmail the Europeans, and maybe even to inflict a nuclear strike on Europe, reaching even to the British Isles. So return of the Crimea, it's not only a matter of the international law, it's the matter of survival of Europe. And we wanted that matter to be reviewed in a complex manner, and the proposals to be submitted in each area, what can be done by the countries of the region and in cooperation with the external players. Mr. Alexander, in continuation of the topic, this conference and the collection of experts, it probably enables you to communicate with them and feel the sentiment existing in the countries they represent. Have you felt any pro-Russian lobby among those experts, or maybe somebody who underestimates the threat, who does not understand fully the threat? Well, among the participants of that conference, we would hardly see someone directly pro-Russian. Someone just may be afraid of the nuclear blackmailing, but we have relevant arguments. If Crimea is left beyond the brackets, if we are being tipped off that we shouldn't be doing this, it means that nuclear blackmailing of Russia works. So it means that nuclear deterrent does not work. And God forbid something happens in the Baltic region, another country gets captured, and tactical nuclear weapons are being positioned here, so nothing can be done. No, this territory of a NATO state cannot be liberated because everybody is afraid of the risk of the nuclear conflict. So there were some notes like that, but generally, to the large extent, they understand that Ukraine has a right to liberate its territories. They would like it to be made in a diplomatic way. Well, we would like it too. We are not a warring state because we are peaceful, but the regime existing in the Russian Federation, they deny us subjectivity. They say that there is nobody to talk to here. So what diplomacy can we talk about when one of the partners does not accept us as a subject? So there were some minor remarks, but generally everybody understands that Crimea is Ukraine, that Ukraine has a right under the UN Charter, Article 59, the right to self-defense. we have all moral and legal reasons to liberate Crimea. Well, we touched upon the topic of violation of human rights, which result from the Russian aggression in Crimea, Miss Olga. So we know that it was not only the security matters that were discussed there, but also the violation of human rights, the results of such aggression, something that is going on in the peninsula now. So what did we tell our partners, and what have we heard from us? First of all, I want to thank the armed forces of Ukraine, thanks to whom we can continue our work and thanks to whom we will return the Ukrainian Crimea. And I want to thank the team of the Center for Defense Strategies and the team of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, who, regardless the full-scale invasion, organized this conference. I'm a human rights activist, but this conference is important for me too, because we understand that without security in the region we will have no mechanism to defend human rights anywhere, and it's good to work in a good team like that. Ms. Emine already mentioned it, that security and expert dimensions, they go hand in hand, and our colleagues supported the idea that the topic of human rights should be present during the consideration of all the matters regarding the Black Sea security. So we had an expert panel, expert discussion of other problem, the information war waged by Russian Federation against us. But the framework is way more broad. It's not only against our country. They waged that war against all the countries of the democratic world, and the risks are numerous here. Today we're saying that information warfare, it doesn't have a definite forward edge of the battle area. Like, we cannot say that there are battles going on here, but there are none here. So this information war is going on in all the countries of the democratic world, and the methods of such war are so hybrid that sometimes we cannot even notice it. Not only regular consumers of information, but also the people who have some expert background, analytical background, they not always see the Russian narratives which work against us. And this is exactly what, and it was confirmed by famous experts, the writer Peter Pomerantsev, who was part of our panel, the Professor Rory Finnin of Cambridge University, who, just like Peter, studies Russian narratives for a long time and why Russian narratives work. So we all achieved the same conclusion, that Russian propaganda is a weapon and it kills people. So in the context of regional security, it's one of the key issues, because there are a number of methods of information war that were trained in occupied Crimea by Russian Federation. We introduced the study of Crimean human rights group, so how those narratives were formed. We developed a dictionary where we explained the meaning of many words that Russia uses, starting from banderovцы to maneuvers, when Russia equalizes nationalist and Nazi terms. So what are the tricks they use, how this propaganda thing works? And the problem is that even the countries that are friendly to us, that support us in a just way, they support us with humanitarian aid, with weapons. If you communicate with the people, those people will tell you those Russian narratives about Crimea, like it's ambiguous, it used to be a Russian territory, we have to all sit at the table of negotiations. Think about Russia will continue attempting to hack the system of international security through Crimea. They will try to impose through their narratives some special approach to Crimea, for example. Let's install some hybrid government here, United Nations, peacekeepers, referendum. They will do everything just to make sure that Crimea does not return under Ukrainian control. Without that, there would be no security for the region, for Europe, and for the world, I'm sure. So Russia does not leave their attempts. And this information war has a definitive meaning for us. We tried to join our colleagues around this topic, and we received very kind and open-minded support by all the experts. We were afraid that full-scale invasion may avert many experts avert their attention from Crimea, but thanks to our efforts, Crimean platform and Crimea is still on agenda, which is important. And moreover, along our human rights track, we see that more experts, more organizations want to join, specifically those expert areas which are related to Crimea, because everybody starts understanding that it all started with Crimea, and many people now want to get engaged in all those discussions, how to cope with the consequences of this long-term occupation, how to return Crimea to Ukraine, and how another key matters that were discussed and where we also found support by our partners from different countries was the matter of security in the region, which is impossible without bringing to liability of those guilty. All crimes committed by Russian Federation starting from 2014, they have to be brought to liability for all those crimes. And again, getting back to the topic of security and human rights matters are connected. What started in 2014, the preparation of Crimea as a military base, they were preparing to have the caliber missiles launched against Vinnytsia from Crimea, from the Black Sea basin, to have Crimea used as the large-scale platform for crimes against human rights. So minor crimes, they entail bigger crimes in broader territories further on. So it started way before. When Putin just took office, there were horrible terroristic acts behind which was Putin and FSB, who committed those terroristic acts that we know, and they were happening in Russia, including the tragedy of Beslan. So no one was brought to liability. If back in 2004 Russia was killing children in their territory, unfortunately now we see how many children were killed in Ukraine after almost 20 years. And it's good that our experts, they mentioned that we have this joint understanding of this problem, and I appreciate the input of my colleagues that this track is present in Crimean platform. And now the majority of the countries supported the creation of special tribunal for the crimes against Ukraine, and we keep promoting that track too. And in the context of liability, important matter will be the creation of real mechanism of bringing to liability of propagandists, because they are efficient, their propaganda works because we don't have mechanisms to bring them to liability for what they do. But the scale of violence against the civil population, we see examples of violent attitude to the prisoners of war too. So it's all the consequences of this propaganda, when those propagandists were creating that content without liability. And we will be witnessing the same cases. We will be shocked in future when we see what was happening in those places that are still occupied by Russian Federation, and the only thing that can secure us is the liability, for instigation to genocide, instigation of the crimes against humanity, instigation of the war crimes. They are international crimes according to the international law, and we insist such mechanisms to be created. And we are discussing what can be the international mechanisms that can be engaged, starting from public platforms where one can find verified information about Russian propagandists, not only some public people, the talking heads, but also the representatives of media who were making those broadcasts, making news. They were creating contact. They left for Europe or the United States, and they're looking for jobs there. They continue creating their content there, and we understand who may benefit from that conflict. This is why we say that it's not only a threat for Ukraine, but many countries of the world too. And we were seeing support at the expert level, and there is a number of discussions going on, and we hope they will go on in Brussels and maybe in the United States too. So really we have support, and there is readiness by of our partners to proceed to some specific things, some concrete things. That was a result of the Black Sea Conference. Olga touched upon a very important segment of the work of the Ukrainian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It's the liability, and I want to segregate. There is a number of elements. Is the International Court of United Nations, who submitted the cases against Russia about the financing of terrorism, and another one that we submitted 2 days after the beginning of the full-scale invasion, big folders with the documents where we insist that Russia manipulates the notion of genocide to cover their own crimes. And another track is International Criminal Court. International Prosecutor Crimean, in cooperation with the Ukrainian Office of the Prosecutor General, they initiated a number of activities to identify the Russian war crimes, but they also have a mandate to mention the genocide crimes, but due to certain circumstances such cases cannot be considered by ICC, and now we promote the creation of international tribunal for the crimes of genocide. Whether it would be classical or hybrid tribunal, well, there is a core group of states who are looking for a solution to unclassical challenge. More than 30 countries. The last meeting was in Strasbourg, France, and soon there will be a summit of the Council of Europe in Reykjavik. It would be a key summit in terms of continuation on work of the criminal. And yet another thing is the compensation of losses. Now the Ministry of Justice, they will be visiting that summit, and they will introduce the register of all those losses for the crimes that losses and damages that result from the crimes committed by Russia in our territory. Well, the processes may take years, but without that track, the liability of Russian Federation will not exist, and we will not be secure. Dear colleagues, please get involved in our conversation, please. Good afternoon, Nadia Yurchenko, Ukrinform. I have 2 questions to Ms. Emine Japarova. First, Ukraine keeps saying that the Black Sea is the source of threat to the east flank of NATO. Do you think that NATO realizes this threat at all? And may these threats be discussed during the summit in Vilnius? And another question is, Russian media, well, Russia was irritated by the statement of Volodymyr Kuleba that when he said that Black Sea should become a NATO sea, just like Baltic Sea. Well, probably they don't yet want to act so, but did it have some did it stimulate some emotions in them? Well, there was a strategy of NATO developed for 10 years ahead. Ukrainian and Georgian experts were invited to work on that document, and the key statement that was coming from Georgians and the Ukrainians, that NATO has to have some strategic vision of the Black Sea. It was added to that document, but only in part. We are joined in the opinion, in the realization that there is no strategic vision, not in the countries of the Black Sea basis, neither in the NATO countries. So from our point of view, we have to develop this vision. And second question, the commentary of Dmytro Kuleba. Yes. Yeah. Currently, it's not a pancake that we fry and eat right away. It's a lot of work where you gradually prove Why is it important to have the presence of those countries in the region? Why it's not about the local or regional security, but it's a matter of global security? And why, from what we verify, from we identify and describe those threats, we won't be able to cope with them right away? Our task is to consolidate those countries around this task. The task of Vilnius, meanwhile, we know that Bucharest 2008 is the policy of open doors. It's not enough for us for the time being. We want to open the doors and we want to see the whole ahead. After Vilnius, we must understand what's behind those open doors for Ukraine. And we have a feeling that Ukraine not only, and we have to create the perception that Ukraine does not only receives the aid and support, but Ukraine is the contributor to the regional and global security. After the end of the war, we will have the most professional army with a lot of experience, which will be different from the nominally existing army. I mean, the army which really has experience, with the capabilities that we are developing now, and with the unity of the nation that we probably shocked the world with, and we continue to demonstrate everything, all of this to the world, something that we did not expect from ourselves. This is what makes us different from others, that makes us a nation. If I may add about the internal sea of NATO, if we look at the countries of the Black Sea Basin, there are 3 of them who are already parts of NATO, and Georgia and Ukraine are partners of NATO. So beyond that umbrella is only Russia. And if we talk about the more rapid integration of Ukraine and I hope Georgia to NATO, that this is how this sea will be transformed into internal sea of NATO. That approach worked in other regions when NATO covers the territory in a number of ways, by surveillance and patrolling. And getting back to the fact that we will not have capability to grow our navy shortly, we have to create the configuration which would enable us to maintain balance and security. And we have to use to the maximum extent that today's situation to form alliance like that. And I hope that minister was meaning something like this. It's just statement of fact. And the fact that it irritates Russia once again means that it's correct. Good afternoon, Igor Bolyan, Armia Inform. What is the role of the small alliances in reinforcement of Ukraine in the Black Sea Basin? Well, I would rather start what many people were talking about from the expert point of view and political point of view. The Black Sea countries, they did not formulate their vote. There is no regional vote and such. There is no vote of the Black Sea countries in NATO when they lobby some configuration. If they have some joint voice which would promote their interests, many problems in the Black Sea Basin would have been resolved earlier. I strongly believe in alliances, not maybe for security configuration only, but also for lobbying of the interests of the smaller countries, because if we look at the changes that are going on in NATO and the European Union, we see that the voice of Baltic countries becomes stronger, the voice of Poland becomes stronger, Finland emerged just now. They will have very clear understanding of the threat emerging in Russia, and they will join that internal lobbyism. So creation of such small alliances, it may not necessarily be a military alliance, it may be a political alliance, but their formation will influence the political resolutions, and this is how this configuration is built now. The centers of decision making are being changed, they are getting more diversified, and the voice of smaller countries is becoming stronger. So I think that the short-term future at least belongs to them. Maybe within the next 5 years, I think we will see the picture where small alliances will play an important role. I want to give an example of Indo-Pacifica. United States created a couple of such alliances, small alliances, we may call them so. From the point of view of proactive diplomacy, AUKUS, Australia, Great Britain, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Philippines, and United States. So we are witnessing the multilateral system to be in a serious crisis. It cannot give response to all the challenges, including the security challenges that arise in the world, and among the 5 members of the permanent members of the Security Council, there is Russia, who is a troublemaker in the world, and they use the license to kill Ukrainians. There is the need to search for other alliances to cope with the threats that originate locally or globally, to be more globally flexible in such situations. So I think that those regional alliances that were initiated by Ukraine and Crimean platform may be considered as such alliance. It's the coordination platform, well, not formalized, but it has tactic and strategic tasks, and we state that it's successful. Well, it's intangible. We don't have some permanent bodies operating, but we coped with the tasks that we set in front of ourselves. For example, Lublin Triangle, every format that we initiate, bilateral, trilateral, quadrilateral, they allow us to solve promptly the arising problems. I think that in international relations what's important is trust, and trust is being created through communication and constant contact, and we want to enjoy the trust of the neighboring countries and also of those with whom we share some values. And regional alliances are about the active diplomacy, subjectivity not only when Ukraine is capable of creating such alliances, but also to implement them and unite everybody around our vision. Again, unite other countries around our vision. Dear friends, if we have any more questions on the floor, please let us know. And summarizing it all, I want to ask a simple but maybe complex question. What's on? What's further? Well, if we exercise all of our tasks, we will set up the next conference somewhere in Crimea, like Bakhchisarai or Simferopol. Well, it's a strategic goal, but practically the experts are currently finalizing the document. Based on the discussions that we had, we will start disseminating it in our partner countries, and we will have internal format with the list of all the actions that we recommend for our government authorities. We will share it with everybody who is involved, and we will pay everyone's attention to the recommendations. As to the international partners, we have 2 non-formal confirmations that the document is taken into work by 2 governments, 2 key partner governments, who showed some interest in our proposals, because it's important to know that there are some things that can be done right now. And as Emine mentioned, we plan to make a voyage around a number of countries to continue and to expedite this expert exchange, because there is this practice in Ukraine now of cooperation between experts and the government. In Europe, for example, this practice was implemented way before. The experts influenced the adoption of the government resolutions, and we disseminated the letters to have everybody confirm the date of the next conference next year. We are happy to have this key conference to take place on that very date when the Moscow ship drowned. We hope that the next year we will see the Moscow itself drown. So this is what we will celebrate there. I also want to add that we will have this conference in Yalta or Bakhchisarai for sure. Practically, we hope that we will be able to see the propagandists brought to liability. Well, some of them we won't, as you know, but some of them we will see brought to liability and then end up behind the bars under the simple international mechanism that will be created. And also Ms. Emine mentioned that there are certain measures developed by the Crimean platform, and it's a good result that even regardless of the full-scale invasion last year, regardless all that horror that we've seen in our country, that our people had witnessed, there was a summit of Crimean platform, and in Zagreb there was a parliamentary first summit, and it's important that this year there will be the second parliamentary summit. Parliamentary track is important for us because Crimean platform is the third dimensions. It's the government, parliamentary and expert, and there will be another security conference. And now that it works as the permanent platform, it's an important achievement, important result. And as to the expert track, it will be the continuation of work of our experts with our friends and partners in different countries, including creation of different mechanisms of verification, collection of information about Russian propagandists and the employees of Russian media who are abroad currently, so they will find no place to hide. The brand that they don't, the good Russian, is something that we have to work on because it's a strong brand abroad. We have to continue working with the partners so they understand what is their error, what is the risk of this content that Russia imposes through their agents. So there is a lot of specific steps that we continue working on, and apart from those the results that were mentioned, there will be more. I think there will be a chaos in international relations for about a decade, because the system that was installed after the 1991, it will never be back, and that chaos will influence us too. So if you have the strategy, you are more likely to achieve your goals, and that document as an idea or prerequisitions for the strategy, it should exist. And Crimean platform as an informal institution or network institution which generates such ideas should continue existing too, and it's a response, it's an answer to the question about the small alliances. If someone is the adherent of the English theory of international relations, they said that no China and no United States will dominate in this world. There will be regional efforts, there will be creation of many networks that will compete between themselves. There will be new rules set for coexistence. So this is what the future will look like. So the importance of regional alliances, or for example external alliances, Britain is not a part of Europe, of Black Sea Basin, but they have their presence, they have their interest there, so we can get involved both India and Japan. And I think it's the matter of Finlandization 2.0, because for Finland, the country which was preparing to become a NATO member, they were creating different formats of regional cooperation to get reinforced in case of conflict, to get additional resources. This is the instance we should follow, and thanks to Mr. Lavrov, they demonstrated good strategy which can be an example for Ukraine. Thank you for this conversation. Emine Japarova, Alina Frolova, Oleksandr Khara, Olga Skrypnyk, and we continue working for our victory, and glory to Ukraine.